welcome to this explainer. Picture this. You're walking down a busy street in downtown Dallas. It's late 2025, maybe early 2026. You've seen Uber cruising by, and it's completely autonomous. Pretty wild, right? It feels like the future's finally here. But what actually happens when that futuristic vision starts bumping into reality? Like literally bumping into things? Well, today we're unpacking a massive federal investigation into one of Uber's autonomous vehicle partners. It's a situation that is completely reshaping how we look at robotaxis and, honestly, the safety of the streets we all share. 16. Just 16. That is the staggering number of crashes involving Uber's partner Avride in a span of just 4 months after they launched their service in Dallas. I mean, think about that for a second. That is essentially an average of 1 crash every single week. This isn't just some minor technical glitch we're talking about. It's a rapidly escalating situation that has drawn the immediate, urgent attention of federal safety regulators. And NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, man, they did not hold back. They described the vehicle's programming as demonstrating excessive assertiveness and insufficient capability. Now, that is highly unusual, super blunt language coming from a federal regulator. I actually want you to keep this exact phrase in the back of your mind as a recurring motif throughout this explainer, because it just perfectly captures the dangerous disconnect between what these self-driving systems are programmed to do and what they can actually handle safely out in the real world. So, what does this actually look like on the street? The mundane but incredibly dangerous reality of these 16 collisions is what's truly concerning. We're talking about a fleet of Hyundai Ioniq 5s doing things like clipping the open door of a parked pickup truck, which, by the way, actually caused a minor injury in December 2025. They were turning right into vans during lane changes, hitting dumpsters, and just outright failing to stop for slow-moving or stationary vehicles right in their path. And get this, here is the absolute craziest detail. All of these incidents happened with a human safety monitor sitting right there in the driver's seat. Yet, out of the 16 reported crashes, that safety monitor only attempted to intervene 1 single time. Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. The partner. Who exactly is Avride? To really understand how this happened, we've got to walk through this timeline. It perfectly demonstrates the breakneck speed of this rollout and the absolute failure that followed. Uber and Avride only announced their partnership in October of 2024. Just over a year later, December 3rd, 2025, boom, they launched their Robotaxi service in a 9-square-mile section of downtown Dallas. By March 2026, they had hit that 16th crash in 16 weeks, and by May 2026, NHTSA stepped in with a formal federal investigation. The speed from their grand launch to a full-blown regulatory crisis is just mind-blowing. So where did this tech even come from so fast? Well, Avride is a subsidiary of an Amsterdam-based tech company called Nebius. Nebius actually came out of this massive $2.5 billion restructuring of the Russian internet giant Yandex back in 2024. Because of that, Avride inherited self-driving tech that had already been in development since 2017. And they are operating on a massive scale. Uber and Nebius committed up to $375 million just to scale Avride's fleet up to 500 vehicles. So, yeah, this is definitely not some small, scrappy startup experiment. We're looking at a highly funded global operation. Which brings us to Section 2, the pivot, Uber's AV strategy. To get why Uber is relying so heavily on partners like Avride in the first place, we have to zoom out and look at their monumental shift in business strategy. From 2015 to 2020, Uber was burning billions on a massive in-house self-driving program. They had huge capital expenditures, and they assumed 100% of the safety liability. But that era ended tragically after a fatal crash involving a pedestrian in Tempe, Arizona in March 2018. So they sold off their tech. Now, they've pivoted to this platform model. Uber just integrates multiple third-party partners. It gives them immense scale, it lowers their development costs, and, crucially, it delegates the safety liability and operational costs directly to those partners. Basically, Uber supplies the demand, the partners supply the cars. Under this new model, they've built a massive global web of autonomous partnerships. Just to give you an idea, they're testing a Lucid Gravity Robotaxi with Nuro in San Francisco, VW minibuses with Moya in LA, they're working with Wave and Nissan over in Tokyo, and Waymo in Austin and Atlanta. They are already live with autonomous rides in 8 cities and are targeting 15 by the end of the year. And honestly, from a pure business perspective, it's working. In their first quarter 2026 earnings, Uber reported that their autonomous trips have grown tenfold year over year. Moving on to Section 3, the Texas pattern. Now, you might be wondering, why are we seeing so much of this action and, frankly, all these crashes happening specifically in Texas? The simple answer is regulation.
or rather a very specific type of it. Texas has some of the most permissive autonomous vehicle regulations in the entire U.S. This loose legal environment naturally attracts a bunch of operators looking for an easy, low-friction market to launch in. But here is why this matters to you. It means oversight is almost entirely reactive. NHTSA didn't launch their investigation because Ovride failed some strict safety tests before hitting the road, because those tests basically don't exist there. The investigation was triggered by crash reports after the cars were already driving around. The regulators are essentially forced to just clean up the mess after the fact.
To truly understand the massive safety gap this creates among operators who are totally permitted to be on the road, let's contrast the major players here. Waymo sits as the industry benchmark. They're the gold standard right now. They've got over 200 million fully autonomous miles and a safety record that is substantially better per mile than human drivers. Then you look at Tesla, who is currently facing its own massive NHTSA investigation after 14 crashes in Austin, a rate that was calculated at about 4 times worse than human drivers. And finally, Avride, with 16 crashes in just 4 months. It really highlights the staggering disparity in capabilities between companies that all share the exact same legal right to operate on public roads right next to you and your family. And that brings us to Section 4, the ultimate question: who bears the blame? When the technology inevitably fails under this new platform model, who actually takes the fall? Let's think about the reality of the ride from the customer's perspective. When an Avride vehicle suddenly decides to change lanes and sideswipes a van in Dallas, that passenger, they booked the ride through the Uber app. The vehicle they're sitting in, it's displaying Uber's branding. It is carrying Uber's customers. So the really crucial point here is that while the regulatory investigation is targeting Avride and the competence of their specific software, the reputational exposure fundamentally threatens Uber. Uber staked its entire strategy on trusting partners to shoulder the risk, but at the end of the day, they still own the customer experience. Which brings us right back to our motif from the federal regulators: excessive assertiveness and insufficient capability. These cars were quite literally programmed to act aggressively and decisively in traffic, but they wholly lacked the perception and the smarts to actually execute those actions safely. And regulators allowed this software to carry human passengers on public streets, leading directly to 16 collisions in 16 weeks. Look, this investigation is about so much more than just one partner in Dallas. It could very well set the precedent for how regulators evaluate massive platform companies that are deploying robots they didn't even build and don't directly control. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. How many crashes is it going to take until a platform's massive brand inevitably absorbs its partner's failures? Uber thought they outsourced their liability, but as we are seeing on the streets of Dallas right now, you cannot simply outsource your reputation. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it brought some clarity to a complex topic, and I'll catch you on the next one.